Pokeballs. Aren't they beautiful? But at the same time, sometimes they get boring, and maybe we want them to look like something else. What if you could take any picture of anything and make it into Pokeballs in your camera? Well, I'm here to tell you that you can, and that it is very easy to do, and that I will show you how to do it in this video. At first, I started following other tutorials here on YouTube on how to make your own shape of Pokeballs, but I found it extremely cumbersome to try to cut out shapes in paper, and since I suck at this, I started thinking about other ways to do it. I came up with the brilliant idea that you could take overhead film. And there is overhead film specially adjusted for your printer at home. There is for laser printers and for inkjet printers. And if you make a sheet of some interesting shapes and you make sure that you have a black background, and you also make sure that the whitest point in the picture is absolutely white. I use the curves tool in Photoshop for this, but there are other ways as well. Just make sure that the brightest point is absolutely white and that the darkest points are absolutely black. And then go wild with some shapes. You should make sure also that the size of the shape you want to have as aperture is not wider than the lens you're going to use on your camera. After printing this on an overhead sheet, you can see that it doesn't become absolutely black, but when I've tested this, it looks good enough. Another thing that's good to think about the overhead sheet is to try to find one that is as clear as possible. I found that the ones I bought, the Xerox ones, they are quite okay, but they are a little bit cloudy, so they aren't perfectly clear, and this makes your pictures look a little bit hazy, unfortunately. Cut out your shapes in a small square and get a good lens for this. Any lens that gives you a nice bokeh normally. I've chosen here a Samyang 135 f2.0 lens. Any lens with an f number of 2.8 or less should be okay. Then you need a little bit of tape, and preferably you should have something to put on your lens to block out light that is easy to put on the lens. I use black velvet that looks like this, but you can use anything you could think of that shuts out light completely. With the black velvet, which is adhesive on one side, I simply just mark the circumference of the lens and then I cut it out. Okay, it seems to fit quite alright. Then I need to cut a hole in the middle as well. As you can see, the black velvet is basically a holder for the small aperture image of the skull. I make sure that the hole is big enough for the skull, but small enough so that it's covered with black when I put the skull on there. And I put it on gently like this, trying my best to center the hole. You can adjust the aperture a bit to see where the center is. Okay, that looks alright. The good thing with this adhesive is that it isn't very permanent, so after using this for a few days you can easily remove it without any traces or residue of the glue. Then you just make sure that the skull stays there, and of course place it in the middle. I'm using some electrical tape here, but I'm sure you can find even better ways to attach the skull to the lens. And voila! Now we have our new lens with magic Pokeballs. And even if you're not planning to use this for something serious, it makes for a fun time for an evening or two, just as an experiment. A thing you could try that I haven't tried since I don't have a color printer is what would happen if you printed a color aperture template. I have no idea, but I'm sure the images would look very interesting. And if you don't want to miss my next photography tip, you know what to do.